already know me, but hi, I'm Becky. I'm a SVP of Information Systems at Highlands Residential Mortgage. And basically, my role is to manage the team who handles all of our LOS, POS, and associated integrations and vendors, right? So anything that has to do with the loan process, any technology associated with that, my team handles. So going to the ICE conference was definitely an eye-opener, but also a critical opportunity for me to meet with some of our vendors that I've never met in person and to have some conversations, some fun, some not so fun, but then also to see what else is out there. So that was my role in going. I went with one of my senior admins, and so she was more on the how do I, and I was more of just what can we. And so that was a fun, we had a lot of fun conversations, and I was like, hey, it'd be cool if, and she's like, okay, calm down. So we did a lot of that.
Did you see any of the speed demos? Did they do the speed demo sessions?
So there were a few that I really wanted to see, and oddly enough, because I'm a nerd, I wanted to go see the Ask Reggie demo that AllRegs, built into the Encompass platform had. But when we went up there, it was impossible to hear because it was in the big expo area, and they had it on one little TV, and it was probably like 30 people deep, and I'm like, I'm not going to stand here and try to act like I can hear. So
right.
A lot of those demos were like that. They were like at booths with like one TV and somebody without a mic talking. And I'm like, this isn't going to work for me.
Yeah. And then I wondered, did they have that annual, Kristen, where they did the speed demos on the big screen up on the stage?
I think it's possible that they did. One of the issues that I have at some of these conferences is I never get into the sessions and I never get into the demos because it's meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, because it's just that opportunity to sit down with folks.
Right. And I think someone like you, Becky, would for sure love the speed demo sessions. If you can get to one that's on the big screen in the big area, you would just eat it up and love it.
Oh, yeah. I geek out about that stuff. Show me cool stuff.
Yeah.
Love it.
Do you want me to introduce myself, Molly? I'm Jen Chapman. I think I have been on a call with at least everybody here at least once. I'm an EVP of Equity Resources, independent mortgage banker. So I am in charge of all of operations and IT and tech and development at my company reports up through me. So I'm in love with your side, Becky. That's why I love that so much. But also, of course, operations and everything that comes along with credit risk and all of that.
And thanks for letting me tag you in that LinkedIn post today, because I was curious to hear what you had to say about the Copilot stuff.
I loved it so much. And I immediately tried to do something like I said, and it was a fail because of the way I take my notes. But maybe we could talk about that later a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So how did you want us to tackle it? You want me to start talking about the ICE conference, Molly? Is that what you wanted me to? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, it was the ICE conference. So a lot of it is a lot of, stuff, right? There are a lot of parties, there are a lot of happy hours, you are on nonstop. So there's a lot of that energy. So I was trying to be very judicious with how I spent my time. And I did target a few specific vendors that I've seen things about. I know what some of our corporate priorities are around automation. One thing I notice is that they will slap AI on darn near anything. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's AI, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's something that you need. It was fascinating, the variety of solutions they had out there, and a lot of which that were not baked and or available. They were touting, this is on the roadmap, and I'm like, you literally say, hey, it's ready, but you talk to your rep and you can't get it. And I know that that's just part of it, but gets me. Anyway, so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of talk about automation. There was one really great automation session. I can't remember everybody who was on the panel, but Larry Bailey, who I have never met in person, he was there, and he was, it's Mortgage Workflow Partners is the name of his company. And I like his approach to how he wants to handle like client implementations of technology, because he is very process first focused, and it is not sexy, but damn if it isn't, targeted and efficient, because I think that that's probably one of the biggest gaps, that most people are like, oh, I need a fancy new thing to fix all my problems, but they don't actually identify what their problem is because they don't have their processes documented. And they don't really know. They don't know where their obstacles are, where their gaps are, and where they're literally bleeding thousands of dollars a day, or, whatever. So I totally dug that session, and I loved how he was like, these are the tools that you have access to right now. You don't have to pay extra for, and here's how I would apply them. He gave real world examples that were just spot on. And he's like, and I want you guys to message me after the conference and tell me what you did. And it was just a really impactful session that was very clear. It was smart, but it wasn't bloated, So I really, really liked that. Because with a lot of the other presentations I saw, it was shiny object, not what's your problem, how is it prioritized, are you saving money, are you generating revenue by bringing in new business, like what's the driver. But that session really focused on it, so I was like, oh, Laura. So that was really, really good. Definitely automation and AI was like the forefront of everything. Obviously, another big part of it, and I was in a couple of sessions where people spoke to this, the state of not just our industry, but like the country as a whole. And my big takeaway from that, and y'all can quote me on this, nobody knows what the heck is going to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, hey, if this happens, all of these things could happen. And I'm like, yawn, man, this is exhausting, session after session. And I get it. We have to try and do some kind of theorizing to plan. But what I took away from all of we don't know what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen with rates. We don't know what's going to happen with builders. Look at your processes. You know what you know. Make it better. So if production goes, woo, you can scale. And if production doesn't, then you're saving money. That's what I took from it. I was like, you know what you know, don't bet on what you don't know, because none of these people do. And I was in like the economy super session. There was some guy from like JP Morgan Chase who's like some bigwig. And everybody pretty much said the exact same thing. We don't know what the heck is going on, and we can't tell you what to do.
Hey, you're a bigwig.
Oh,
Come on.
I'm a bigwig.
Yes, you are.
Anyway, so those are my like two big things from it. There were lots of like little sessions here and there, little takeaways that I really loved, but overall, those were the two main: automation and AI, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. Pardon my language.
And to expand on the Larry Bailey part, to be able to see him in person and listen to him is phenomenal, because he's so wonderful and his processes, like you said. So I have all of our Encompass admins and our IT people following him on LinkedIn, because he offers all these wonderful free videos that really raises the knowledge and gets you thinking about possibilities in the system. So he offers so much for the industry, just free. And he's pretty wonderful. So anybody who has Encompass should be following him, because he's so wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, he can sometimes come across, like, I know all the things, but he knows all the things. He knows all the things.
He's pretty awesome.
I was going to go meet him, but he always had people waiting to talk to him. So I was like
a celebrity.
Okay, then. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And did you want me to kind of start with some of my techie items, because it really kind of follows Becky's stuff, and we might, she might have some thoughts on that as well.
Everybody knows what the lenders won. This was the annual summit, right, Jen?
Their annual summit, and it happened in Cancun this year, which was, you think it sounds great, but it was a little odd. But I don't know if they're going to do that again. But it was a great conference. One of I mean, one of my favorites because it is really like-minded companies, because you can go into sessions based on volume or go into sessions based on topics. So when you want to talk to really other lenders your size, you have that option to go into the room based on volume. So it's fantastic. So some of the stuff I took away tech-wise is I was so surprised how many lenders are starting tech companies. And right, Becky, like it's insane. So I know the president of our company isn't too interested in using technology that is owned by another mortgage company because of data, right? They doesn't want to put the data in their hands, but it's almost becoming impossible because what you learn is those companies that you don't even think are related to other lenders are. And so I'm like, oh, he's going to be ticked about that. Oh, he's going to be ticked about that. So that was an interesting takeaway. But I did attend one of the sessions on AI, which is mine and Becky's fun topic. And it was interesting because if you know, does anybody know Karen Shaw? She's from First Option. She's a boss lady. She's awesome. And so she and her husband run that company. But this AI business that they are doing is really her baby. So it was fun to see her up there talking about this AI company. And so it's been really the first time I've seen a lender our size. I'm not talking Chase and the Rockets, right? I'm talking independent mortgage bankers for mid-size and lower. Start a company like this with consumer-facing AI. And so it was interesting to hear that they are ready to take on that, because there's a lot of compliance and a lot of risk around that consumer-facing piece, where I think every conference you go to, and you probably heard Becky at ICE, it's all in the background right now. It's all in your processing and your underwriting and your post-closing and your QC, non-consumer facing, because you don't have the compliance risks and the built-in biases of whatever you're feeding it, the output of that. So it was super interesting to see that that's how they're taking it. And their whole approach was, her name is Macy. The AI's name is Macy, and she presents herself as such. And they're really going to use her on things like Facebook and like to really grab consumers, like ads. If you think about, they're going to run ads, grab their attention. And it's all about capturing data and getting them over to an LO, of course. That's the whole point. But they're really going to nurture in a way, let me help you. And then they are trigger words. This is kind of how I perceived it. There are trigger words that if that would cause any type of compliance concern or whatever, let me have you talk to this loan officer. Let me have you talk to this loan officer. But it was still a little scary, because I think there's going to be a time that doesn't work. And so that'll be interesting to see. But I think they're on the forefront of this consumer-facing stuff as far as an independent mortgage banker our size, and not, a Rocket or whatever. So that was super interesting to see. And then, if you've heard of one of the points of sale out there, the big POS, if you've seen them, that Absolute Mortgage has. And so a lot of talk around that as well. And again, such an interesting piece that they are growing that tech company more and more. And so many lenders are feeling comfortable using them, even though it's owned by a mortgage company. So great product, great concept, great. I mean, I hear from their customers and they love it. But, when you talk about putting your customers' data in the hands of another mortgage company, again, that's interesting. So ton of talk about that. Cyber insurance came up. And so I immediately went back, took a look at our cyber insurance. Not that I'm an expert in that area, but it did not seem to be enough. I'm the one who deals with that at our company. So I'm very involved when something like that happens. So when I reviewed our policy, I'm like, man, it doesn't seem like it's enough. So I had the owner of the company review it. We got some quotes and things, and we're looking at that now. I think that any anybody who hasn't looked at their cyber insurance policies in a while should definitely be taking a look at that and comparing it to what you is going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And so kind of really looking at that. So that was a big takeaway that I brought back right away, looked at our
Jen,
policy.
question for you. Do you have ransom insurance?
So it did not appear that our current policy does, but in this new quote, it's pointed out very clearly that it does. And our owner was like, I think it's included in the other one, pointed out to me because I don't see it. So I'm going through that right now, Kristen.
Isn't that crazy? Like, it's literally kidnapping because they're kidnapping your data.
Yeah.
And so it's ransom insurance. So they will pay the ransom in order to get the data, or the, what do they call that when they deny access?
Yeah.
Mm.
And so we actually ran across that before IT started reporting to me. I'm talking like 10 years ago that happened. And we actually had to purchase Bitcoins to pay to get our data unlocked. And that's, before all of this was out in the forefront 10 years ago. But yeah, that it's so needed. So that's a huge thing, a huge takeaway. Review your cyber insurance policies. I mean, I can't even say that enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of non-techie stuff, but one of the big takeaways you can get, our attorney goes to the Lenders One conferences. So if you schedule an appointment for them, you get free advice. And so we always scheduled a time slot with them in the connection hall. And so I was able to get one of our issues fixed. So we do some HELOC business and we do some portfolio HELOCs, but we also utilize figure and symmetry, if you're familiar with those. And we were looking at Nifty. But one of my compliance concerns around figure and why I wouldn't allow it to be turned on was that a loan officer could go out to the figure portal, bypass the LOS, and have their credit pulled by figure issues a denial letter and everything, and you have no record in your LOS. So of course, I'm like, going crazy. Like, I put a halt to that immediately. Nice try, not happening. But they kind of talked me through how you can handle that. It's pretty much, I cannot believe Figure doesn't have a component that links to your LOS that way.
That's wild.
Really wild. So we'll be doing that. But the other piece I was concerned about that I wasn't as concerned about, but still concerned, was the fact that, when you get paid a broker fee, like we would get paid a broker fee, we weren't doing enough to earn that broker fee, right? And you've all heard those horror stories, the litigation that's around, not earning the broker fee, not doing those 8 things or whatever's listed in the contract to earn that fee. So I was freaking out. I'm like, we're not doing crap on these loans. Like, we have to make sure we're compliant. And so we've got to remember that HELOCs really aren't connected to the LO comp rule. And so although that's in your contract and it's suggested you do these things to earn that fee, you can think about it differently when it's a HELOC versus a closed end. So I was able to solidify that and then also understand how we can do the LOS and their portal connection to make sure everything's in our system timely and we report correctly. So little tidbit, yes, if you go to conferences and your attorney is there, go get them. It's great. Anybody interested in collateral underwriting? I don't know if this group would even be interested in that or not.
I would.
Oh, okay. I was like, if at least one person is, I'll talk about it. But if not, this was probably the biggest takeaway for my sales team, I'll say, because not for me personally, but high CU scores, collateral underwriting, with Fannie and Freddie, if those come back over 2.5, lenders usually have a separate review process. And so your appraisal reviewers, anything 2.5 or below, has a streamlined process. Anything with a higher score has an elevated process. And so what we were running into is CU would flag for an overvaluation and it would flag for quality errors. And so the time it takes to go back to correct those and understand if you've got a good, data, or if you have to go get a second appraisal, could be up to 8 days. So LOs are losing their mind. Kristen's shaking her head like, they are losing their mind. They look like idiots to realtors. Everybody's mad. And we have to keep reminding our LOs that this is not an us thing. This is an industry thing. Every lender has to comply with this. So it's not like we have an overlay and we're making you go through this process. So it's big pain in the butt. And so we had another big national lender in the room who does my role, but for a big national lender. And I was explaining this issue because it was just in the open networking session. So you could talk about whatever you wanted. And I promised my sales team I would take that and try to get some info. He literally looked at me, and Kristen, you'll think this is crazy. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I explained it to him again. He said, "You're crazy." So he showed, and he got on the phone after the conference with my appraisal manager and showed her, and she called me like, "Oh my God," blew my mind. So when they run it through CU, you can go in and make sure, how sometimes it'll give different comps and all of this stuff, and then it's a crazy mess trying to figure it out. Go in and open the data, update the data in CU to match the data on the appraisal, because he said there's 3 main spots that sometimes don't match, and that causes the overvaluation. And so we went in, we updated those, and then could get the new data and see if the overvaluation flag went away. And although it doesn't give a new score, you don't have to have a new score to still use it. And so the way he thought about that process was, he said, you don't need to prove anything. You put that data in your file when you rerun it with the new comps, because you've changed the data, put it in your file so that 2 years later, if it's pulled, you have that data, because it doesn't go back and see you historically. You can't pull it up again if you don't capture it at that time. So we're doing that. But he said, it's their job to prove you're wrong, not your job to prove you're right. Put it in the file and move on. And I was like, you're right. Why are we spending this time? It depends on the risk you're willing to take, of course, right? And so he had some crazy data he threw out, and he was like, this has only bit me 2 times out of 2,000 appraisals, so we're willing to take that risk. So just a new way to look at that. We're piloting that at our company to see, are we willing to take that risk? Is it really going to help, and all of that? So that was probably one of the biggest takeaways that I could take back and tell sales, hey, we've heard you. We are listening. We're trying to help you. Here's what we're piloting. So I know I spent a lot of time on that, but Kristen, it was just one of the things I was like, oh my gosh.
It's amazing. I don't think people understand that CU and Freddie's scoring model, it's a house of cards, right? It's built on data that is informed by a person, and they have the historical discrepancies. I mean, Fannie has all the data, right? Because it all goes through CU. And so they see all the discrepancies. They see any, bedroom count, this, that, whatever has it. What is it accounting? What did this appraiser say? What did the last appraiser say? What did this? It's a giant house of cards.
Yeah. Do you know what I learned? And I was like, how did I not know this? That product is really, if you've heard about Home Genius, the standalone product, like an AVM service kind of thing, that Radian developed, that is the back end of CU. Now, I have not validated that, but it came up in this same conversation where I learned this from.
I remember, because I've done this for a long time, right here. Carlos Perez. I don't know if you remember Carlos Perez. I remember sitting in a room with him at Fannie Mae when they were developing CU, when Jake Williamson was in appraisals, and they were talking about this whole program and process and gaining geographic competency right through data. And it did well. It's been beneficial. Certainly anything that gets a rep and warrant is fantastic. But if you think about what happened a year and a half, 2 years ago, where collateral became the #1 repurchase demand.
Oh, I remember.
That was literally because they changed their methodology about how they were looking at the information that they got from CU.
Yeah.
They changed the way, because I flat out asked them. I said, so either every mortgage company in the country is doing it wrong, or you've changed what you're doing and you didn't tell anyone.
Right.
Because it's like, it's like Seinfeld with all the girlfriends, something was wrong with all the girlfriends. Common denominator, probably you, Gary. Same thing. Common denominator was Fannie.
I went back and looked, if you think about 2.5 years ago, probably, if we look back at our repurchase inquiries and what we had to really fight on, ton of collateral. Now we literally won 99% of those, but the work that went into it was pretty much someone's entire salary. We used the whole QC person to constantly fight those. And then we ended up winning, like I said, 99%. It was just absurdity. So it is much better on that front now, but it's interesting how quickly LOs could forget that that I think the CU thing that happens very rarely compared to that is such a big deal. Like, guys, it's really not happening that often. It's literally, we have to elevate 20 a month. And out of those 20, we may have 4 that has to have a second appraisal, and maybe even less than that now with this new thinking, but it just drives them crazy. They feel like it wrecks their relationships with the realtors and makes them look bad. Like
one bad. It's so noisy, right? If somebody loses their commission, they lose a client. It's so noisy.
It is. So there's that. I think only me and you were interested, Kristen. So I'm going to move on. But
thank you, because that was great.
I thought it was interesting.
If you want any more info on that, let me know, Kristen.
100%.
So I have a category named interesting topics.
Ooh.
So who knows what you're going to get here?
I like it.
Funny enough that Candor, one of the tech companies that does the review of things, they said truck drivers' income and employment fraud is on the rise. Huge percentage of the increase is truck driver income and the fraud around that. So not that we had a lot of truck drivers when you look at our employment of our borrowers, but I certainly went back and told my QC that. And to say that so broadly and other people agreeing with them was just interesting to hear. So I don't know what's going on in the truck driving industry, but fraud is on the rise there with their W-2s and such. So weird. Talked a lot about eClose. I think it's finally starting to get some traction for mid-size companies. A lot of us independent mortgage bankers have been doing hybrid e-closings now for years, but with the wet signed note still, which is like whatever, but it's a good start. So several of my peers this year are going full e-close with eNote. And so that kind of tells me this is the first year that I've heard multiple companies our size moving toward that. And so I kind of put it on the radar to know if I want to put it on my roadmap or not. But one company, the piece I want to share about this is one company said, we're all in. So we are defaulting everything to an e-closing. And if the loan officer wants to switch it to paper, we do change of circumstance and add $100 paper fee or doc fee or whatever to their borrowers. So they're really incentivizing the LO to educate the borrower and everybody involved. Let's start moving toward this instead of, they don't want to send a change of circumstance for $100 and look stupid. So I thought that was a good way to push it when you're really ready.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because we already have pretty high adoption of hybrid e-close. We do have Ron, and we've actually done a few e-notes. The challenges with both Ron and e-note, why I think they're not as widely adopted, is because of the county, state, investor, product, all the limitations around that. It has to be very specific on what you can actually do them on. So we've had a small number of them. We have actually talked to, and I think we actually just got approval to default to hybrid e-close though for all of ours, so that our adoption rates go even higher, because I can't think of any reason why they wouldn't want to do it. I don't think we're going to charge anybody for it, but I think we are going to default to that. That's pretty interesting.
But charge the other way. If you don't do hybrid, then you have the $100 fee.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think, if you had it set up and ready to go in 2020 and 2021, boy, did you benefit. So if you were going direct, like we were during that time, because we're just trying to get files to fly through. So a lot of agency. And then you start going back in 2022 to a lot of different investors. That's when you're really like, whoa, it was hard, because not every investor was taking it at that point. But now the warehouse banks and the investors, majority of them just seem to be on board with full e-note now. So it's starting to make more sense. Whereas I'm with you, Becky, a couple years ago, we were like, oh, PennyMac doesn't take it, but they take it. They don't. And my secondary desk was like, we can't do this. So.
Yeah. I will have to tell you a little funny though, because so we had a transaction. It was going to be a Ron with a wet note. And so they were trying to figure out some logistics or whatever. And it turned out that the borrower, and this is such a sidebar, just funny story. Anyways, so they were on a boat, like out somewhere, but they had a printer. And so they were able to print the note and sign it. And I was like, oh, because they want to sign a note on a boat. And my team was just like, no, just stop. Just stop.
No, on the boat.
You're going to sign the note on the boat. And I'm like, so if you sign it in international waters, is there like any legal issue with that? Just kidding.
But if they were like in Florida, they could have, right?
I mean, just think about when you do the bifurcated close and someone's overseas, they have to go to an embassy, because you have to be on American ground.
Yeah.
So you may be right. If they were in international waters, it wouldn't be legal.
Yeah. I think it was in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, well then there you go. They're not just right off the coast in California or Florida. That's funny.
Before you go to your next one, I do want to point out, so I'm glad you brought up that thing about candor and fraud, and even if it's truck drivers, which I think is very, very interesting. I noticed a lot of conversation has shifted around like the AI underwriting solutions, anything that does that. People are moving away from like process, which is still really important, to fraud identification. That is like their number one thing that I mean, the people have been talking about, is identifying that, because their underwriters don't have time to add up all the things on the bank statements and make sure that it actually aligns and that it totals what it should total. So I thought that was really fascinating.
Yes, and they did talk about that. And they also talked a lot about Gateless, which is partnering with Freddie. And so we've demoed Gateless, but I was surprised how fast they are onboarding clients, because so many people already at Lenders One were already partnered with them and loving their life. And so I'm like, wow, they had a fast pickup. I think faster than any of those other type of companies, just from what I can tell, just from what I've gathered. There's no data backing that. It's just from what I'm hearing, but I'm super interested in looking at that too.
I've heard a lot about them, but I haven't seen their product yet.
My team has, and they liked it. And so after I came back from Lenders One and heard that, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go watch that demo they did with them for sure.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Candor or a Techmore or anything like that, where it's really more of a holistic underwrite than just income?
I will tell you the feedback from Lenders One members. I'm not a user ourselves. We chose not to, but so many people were moving off of Candor and going to Gateless. And it was almost like, why would you even think about Candor anymore? So it was and the sales rep was there and he's so lovely. I felt so bad for him, but.
So I've heard that too. So in full disclosure, like I work with Techmore. Techmore was captive with Freedom for a very, very, very long time. So it's developed with Freedom. And so, yeah, if you're going to go down that path, I'll just raise my hand and say, reach out to me, because I'd love to show it to you, because it's like holistic underwrite versus just pieces.
Gotcha. Our problem was the owner of our company was not and has not laid off after 2020. So we staffed up. I killed myself to staff up, handle volume and everything. And so we never laid off. And so it's hard to buy into a tech system that does that when you're overstaffed in underwriting. And so we're making weird choices because we are still right now overstaffed. And so we haven't been pressured to buy one of those so that we can scale because we're so overstaffed. Now, over time, over the last few years, just as people left, we haven't replaced them, of course. So I'm just now getting to the point where I'm thinking, okay, now's the time. We should probably start thinking about how are we going to scale for the next time, because I don't have that big buildup anymore. But yeah. But I was the only person with that problem in the room. So that was a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I'm sure your entire team appreciates it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they do. And so we have some very tenured people that he just wasn't willing to do that to. And so he was like, I'll use the profits to pay their salary. We're going to keep them and we'll be ready for the next wave. So
that's awesome. Are you looking at, and I hate using the term retraining because it's not retraining, it's training around getting them equipped to work on projects like this whenever it comes to rolling out the AI and automation solutions? Because that's something that, when I'm looking at team members, that their roles could become redundant. How do we upskill them for either staying with us to help us keep moving forward, or if they go somewhere else, have additional marketable skills so that they can remain competitive? Because the market is a hot freaking mess. The job market, it is just a hot mess.
It's odd. So I think the first real AI project we're going to push out is going to be around helping sales instead of within the loan production. And I really want to we have built out the most fabulous SharePoint for our loan officers with, every guide, every overlay, every training we've ever done. I mean, it's just so good that I want to do Copilot, the chat bot, in that, so they don't have to go search. Even though you can search for the keywords and find things, it's still a little cumbersome, right? So I really want to help them find the information they need quicker and faster. And so I plan to use our resources toward that, because like you said, you're going to have some left over. So we also have a project team too that helps us. So we're going to pair people up with the project team to kind of do things like that. And I think LO facing help right now is probably the best choice for us. And then number 2 will be, putting something in, whether it's underwriting or income or QC or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever our biggest problem that we need to solve that AI can solve, that's what we'll do next.
Yeah. No, I love that personally, because we're looking, luckily I have kind of like an infrastructure network team who handles most of our stuff over here, right? And we handle like the business applications, but they have more capacity to work on things like SharePoint build out for chatbots like that. The challenge that we've been running into is structuring the data in such a way that it can be searchable and effectively searchable, right? If people are going to use natural language to ask a question, it has to know LTV is loan to value, so you kind of have to build these like, what was the thing I read the other day? I can't remember. Anyway, so that's been one of our challenges, but it's a fun challenge to work on.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. I'm having fun with that, but I'm more concerned with the settings than getting something like that to work, because the security settings in Copilot, so that, you may have your HR SharePoint, you may have your accounting SharePoint, you may have, things that the president has, whatever, you wouldn't want anybody to accidentally be able to search and find. If you've ever looked at the settings for Copilot, they're very robust. And so really understanding those is important. So I feel like that's going to be a bigger part of that project than, the data, just because of the way we have it structured and things.
What is the comp structure for my competing loan officer? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Lockdown.
You get it. You can't just turn it on.
Yeah.
They're like, we have it. Let's just turn it on.
Yeah.
I'll get fired. So
Have you ladies contemplate, and I know you have, and maybe this is a redundant question or rhetorical question, but when you think about underwriters, right? There's going to be a point where loans will get underwritten and underwriters will be deployed when there's an exception. Like the quantum computer that is the human brain is really only needed for the exception, not the rule. The shift then is if you have consistent process that treats everything the same, you need to audit. So you're going to have underwriters that are going to move into an audit capacity versus doing an underwriter capacity. Data intelligence and governance is one of the most neglected pieces in our industry, where we could be given the amount of data that is like parsed through all of these various companies could be extraordinary, but it has been neglected so terribly. So like, I feel like that's the next big build within some of these organizations. There's so much value to the data that we have. The problem is that you can't go back and reinvent the wheel. And so cleaning it up to make it usable, it's kind of a move forward type of structure.
Yeah.
So you've got data intelligence and data governance and enterprise risk management, because when you start to aggregate process, and instead of a person doing a thing, you now have a program and process doing 2,500 every 6 months, or whatever it happens to be, however many loans you're closing. Now you're talking about enterprise risk management, which is like the cyber security and the InfoSec. I feel like we need to start thinking about really creating robust programs, because ERM is also something, vendor risk management, all the pinholes you have in your organization now. And this is just me. These aren't topics that are coming up. Everybody's talking about AI, but nobody's talking about how and what the structure of our organizations is going to look like in the future that I've heard. So I don't know if you're hearing something differently.
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up.
I'm here for you.
No. I'm just saying, I was actually at one of those kind of social events, and I heard someone, and this is not necessarily related to AI, but it's kind of, to me, it's in the same vein. They had a contract expiration with their LOS vendor of, let's just say it's the end of April. And they decided they were going to move to ICE, and they literally just signed their contract.
What? I'm sorry, what? What did
Yeah,
you say? I can't hear you.
They're going to roll out their LOS, and so I think it was a 60-day time frame. And they're like, well, we can't get like a month to month or a 6 month, would have to sign for at least a year. I'm like, sign for a year. Do not blow up. They do not have, and it's this lack of, I don't even know what to say. I mean, enterprise risk, that is risk management, right? Like there, you have a huge, massive risk. Who's making these decisions?
Well, they're going to have a mass exit because
it's going to be a hot
mess. I would not deal with that in my position. Neither would the people that work for me. It's a compliance nightmare to ask someone to do that in that time frame. So
yeah. And they're like, ICE is being so helpful and they're going to help us. And I'm like, have you ever rolled out an LOS in your life?
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. And you know what? I think the percentages on LOS success is like 50%. Like 50% fail, 50% are successful. And that is people who like have like a front end, a rollout and implementation, and then like a beta and a 1 to 2 years, y'all. Come on. Anyway, so that immediately started like firing things, because people are making decisions without considering how it's going to impact so much. And they don't have somebody who's looking at risk. And this is okay, I'm finger painting here, and I'm kind of probably talking outside of my school, so y'all just be with me. Do not put this on the internet, Molly.
I'm putting it on.
But I think a lot of the decisions are being made by people who are like, you know what? It's not a big deal. Like a lot of it is like lifestyle. You know, we've been doing it this way forever. Nothing's going to go wrong.
The loan's never going to default, so we're never going to sue your purchase. They still don't know that that's not the trigger anymore.
It's crazy.
It makes me think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to what Kristen said a few minutes ago with the data that we have, if you even think through when you're trying to build something new, or if you're changing LOSs or whatever, the data you have, like think of all the auto conditions that you've built over the years. So based on state, based on product, based on the stuff, that data alone, exporting that data from your LOS so that you have it to at least start. And, really
Business
those types of
rules.
things, and trying to think through how do you use your data so you're not reinventing the wheel is super important. So I like what you said there, Kristen. I took some notes, but to your point, Becky, they don't even have time to think about stuff like that in 60 days. So they're going to have frustrated employees.
He gave me the vapors. I didn't even know how to talk to that poor man. I was like,
You might want to take that to your company. That might be a merger and acquisition.
That's a good one.
right? I might have to. That poor gentleman.
I
Anyway,
have a
sorry.
couple other topics that you guys may be interested in. We talked a lot about the virtual world and how many people brought people back. That's a big topic right now with everybody trying to bring everybody back. And I was surprised to hear how many people already have done that. And we seem to be of the minority where we haven't brought anybody back. And so we're mostly, largely remote. There's only 20 people in our corporate office now. And there was once a time when I was inventing spaces for people to sit. And so now I'm like, it's like a ghost town. And so we're really the minority. And so as I was thinking through, how did you do that without, having a loss? And they're like, there was a loss. A lot of them did it so that they wouldn't have to lay off, knowing that if you give it a few months after you bring them back, it naturally happens. And I was like, ethically, that's heartbreaking, but whatever. And so we're talking a lot about that. And I think that companies forget, we talk about our LOSs, right? We talk about our point of sales. We talk about our servicing system. We talk about all of the loan manufacturing process, but we're not really talking about all the tools that we probably already have that can help with the virtual environment. So one of the takeaways I had too was coming back and really leaning into our Office 365 environment to help with all of those virtual tools that are out there, but my people don't know how to use. And so our first training's next week, and it's on Microsoft Teams Whiteboard. And so our training and project team put together training on how managers can use it for simple, think about their simple team meetings and how they can use it to even have fun, not loan manufacturing anything, just virtual tools to engage their staff. So that was kind of a tech piece I brought back that I didn't think I was going to bring back. But if you already have Microsoft Office 365 and you're paying a buttload for it anyway, somebody's time should be spent on really learning that, teaching the managers how to use it with their staff. So that was also a good one I wanted to mention. So
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. Is anybody really leaning into all the components of Teams like that?
There are so many.
So many.
There are so many. Yeah, I hammer my IT team and my marketing team because they still leave me on the Teams chat. And I'm playing with them all the time with the polls and the whiteboards and everything. So I force feed them things like that, but not like org wide. It's really just these select crew.
And really, your executives down to your department managers should really know how to use the polls and collect that data from their team and have it dump into their SharePoint and all of those things. And so we do that a little bit, but I'm like, we're using probably 10% of what's available. So if we're not bringing people back, let's lean into the virtual world was really another tech use case there.
That could be something that's a fractional type deal that companies, Molly, that companies could hire for a short amount of time and then come back in for a checkup.
That could literally be a fractional 2-month project. Teach my team how to use the tools we already have. So you're spending, that consultant time, but no more tech spend.
Right.
Yeah. I will say it's interesting that you bring that up though, because I heard a lot of people talking about, oh yeah, they're making us go back to the office, or we're not, and we're kind of in a weird space of they want us to be there, but it's I don't know, it's kind of weird. But I think part of the challenge with that and why a lot of companies are able to force it, like you said, they don't have to do layoffs if people say, oh, well, I'm not going to come back to the office. The competition for talent, it's just because of the way the market is, they can get away with it to a great degree. A lot of companies are taking advantage of that. And I mean, I'm not trying to throw any executives under the bus, and I totally get it. And being in person, there's lots of synergy, but it exists. It's a thing and it's real. But also, I mean, I'm way more productive when I'm at home. If I'm up at the office, I get nothing done.
You know what I'm having a hard time with? I have a staff that is truly amazing. They are so wonderful, and they have worked for me for now, some of them for 12 years. And so my VP of ops, who could very well take my position someday, lives 10 minutes away, but doesn't want to come into the office. I get more done at home. Like, she's saying all these things you do, but I'm like, you're really, in my mind, just my own selfish thinking, I'm like, you would accelerate your career so fast if you were sitting beside me, because these one-off conversations and these one-off learning opportunities are not happening, because I'm not getting in Teams every 10 minutes when I think, oh, you should know what I just experienced so I can help you learn and grow. So your meetings have to be very intentional. And when they're very intentional, you leave all those little nuggets off, and it really expands the time that it would take if you were sitting beside an executive learning their role. So I know that's old thinking, but I'm just saying, those who really are on the path of wanting to take over for, an executive, why wouldn't you come into the office?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
No, I don't disagree with you. That's why I still force myself to go into the office, because even as an SVP, I am engaging with the CEO and the president, and I'm, coming up with stuff all the time, and I'm trying to engage with them. I encourage my people to come in too, but, it's a mixed bag. But you're absolutely right. If you're looking for career mobility in your company, physical presence is important.
If they are also at the office. If they're not, of course, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
but
if they're in Cabo, whatever.
Yeah, but so that's we could talk all day about that. I have so many strong feelings, and I even told my team, I realize I sound like I'm 90 years old, but I'm just saying.
I love it. I love it.
I will say, as someone who is in the job market and is experiencing all of that, it's frustrating to feel like if I was there, this would be a whole different discussion, or if I'm able to, match with a company to figure that part out. And then at the same time, I'm like, okay, but I know what I bring to the table. And part of that is that even from a remote position, I've been able to bridge that gap between compliance and marketing, which is where my niche is. So it's possible, but there are things that, like, from a training perspective, that if I can't turn in the moment and say, what am I doing wrong on this? I realize that I'm missing out on that knowledge to be able to advance as well. I definitely see both sides of that.
When we think about the processors, I just had this conversation with my operations manager this last week. When you think about the processors that were trained in person versus those who are being trained remotely, the knowledge gap is huge. It doesn't matter how talented they are. When you can just turn around and say, "Ooh, I understand how you explained that condition to that loan officer, but let me help you do it in a way you can get better results," whatever, right? Those types of things go away. So I just think everything's taking longer. I mean, they have all the potential in the world. Jill, but what you just said made me think of something. Any of the jobs that you are interviewing for, are you asking them if, and I don't know your circumstances, if you're able to travel or not, but are you asking them questions like, I would love to be able to come up 1 week a month or 1 week every 2 months? Is that something that the company would entertain? Because I really want to dive into the position and all that stuff.
So the answer is yes. So that's one of those things that I'm very willing to travel. And that part's not an issue. And with the previous companies, prior to, honestly, the industry being where it's been for the last few years, we're just getting to that place where, companies are starting to send people back to conferences, that travel, those kinds of things are being, approved. So the last 2 companies that I have worked with, one was Kind Lending, and then the other one was a bank. And so with Kind, that was one of the things that I asked. I said, I would love to be able to be in person, whether it's once a quarter, whether it's once a month. Like, I'm willing to invest that time. And I've sort of put that out there with any of the companies that I've been with. I think that that together time, you can attempt to recreate that with meetings, but it is not the same. And I fully own that than being in the same room. One of the things that was super frustrating with the last company that I was with was that every week we had multiple meetings that everybody was involved with. And you had some people that were always in the office, and then you had the rest of us that were remote. And for the ones of us who were remote, we kind of just sat there with, twiddling our thumbs, because you can't really get a word in edgewise. Sometimes it's really hard to hear. Like, that never really fully works. So I'm very open to that.
Those are tough. I just think it shows interest, and it really, if you say, I am so interested, I'm willing to travel once a month or whatever you would entertain. I just think sometimes that would go a long way, because there's so many people who don't want to do that. So I was just wondering.
Yeah. No, great question.
Oh, we can't hear you, Molly. There you are.
We're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, a lot of times at conferences, you can notice, there's some up and coming companies. There's some companies doing some interesting things, whether they be a tech provider or lender. And I know we've talked about a few here, but were there any other standouts that might be good for Jill to go knock on their doors and see?
First option in their headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. They're doing some very interesting things. They're the one, doing that AI. They are also leaning into the Latino market and the next generation. They just seem like they're very much on a growth path. So if you're not familiar with them, Joe, I think, and they're wonderful people. I know them. Their team even travels with them. And you can tell when the team really likes and respects the owners, they have that there. I'm telling you. So that's a good one.
What was the name of the company again?
First Option.
First Option. Okay.
And I feel like, trying to think differently about the next generation and what they can do to capture the business there, where some of us aren't. That's not where we are focusing. And I think they'll be ahead of some others in 5 years. So they're super interesting. I can't think of any other off the top of my head, but I'll think about that, Molly, and send those over. Absolute is the one that has the big POS. And so I don't know growth wise, I just know they're doing a lot of exciting things. So that might be one to look into. And if I think of any others, I'll pass those along, Molly.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. In terms of like companies that I've heard of, they're mostly on the vendor side, and I'm still vetting. But Jenny mentioned Gateless.
Oh yeah.
Eyeballing them. We are eyeballing actually Indicom as well for some automation and some possible document indexing functionality. They have some interesting tools there. There is a company called Silverwork Solutions that I met with. It was the first time I was introduced to them, and they do a lot of bots and automation that was kind of fascinating. So, I mean, those are just some that I was exposed to that I thought was, fun and interesting. Yeah.
And then
I can tell you had the best swag.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of socks at the ICE
funny.
conference. Apparently socks are the thing. I think I even have Encino socks on right now. So
That's
don't judge me. Don't judge me.
What about with your background, Jill, companies like Active Comply that do that marketing? So you're like, yep, all over those kinds of things.
Yeah, I've been connected to Active Comply and Performline, and familiar with a few others for several years. And honestly, one of the first people that reached out to me was one of the guys from Active Comply. I've never spent a dime with them. Both companies have, like, over the years, if I've been looking or interested or had questions, have sent me things. Again, up until recently, never spent a dime with either company. Both are good. But as far as like from a hiring perspective, they're mostly sales positions. And so it kind of depends on how you look at it. You know, Kristen and I were talking earlier about like everything that you do is sales in some way, whether you're selling yourself, a service, the company itself, et cetera. But it's a very different way of living your life as opposed to, working behind the scenes and doing different things. So,
I'll just say though, you are so wonderful and pleasant and appealing that I would much rather talk to you than the Active Comply reps that were there and that I know. I'm just saying.
Oh,
Don't
that's funny.
anyway, Molly. But I'm just saying, Jill, I don't know. You just speak so eloquently. And I think sometimes the people who really know the stuff can really train to sell it, because that's who people like me want to talk to, are the
sales
Jills.
engineers.
Yeah.
So yeah, just interesting thought. Yeah.
That's a good point. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do they call them? Sales engineers, the people who actually know how the product works and how it'll benefit you and can actually translate it into real world speak instead of just, front end sales. God bless.
Vendors usually hate me because I will tear them up. I'm not playing around. You're going to prove it to me. I don't want your sales talk. So someone like a Jill would appreciate me more than a typical salesperson.
Can I tell you one last funny story from the conference?
Yes.
And honestly, I think you ladies will absolutely die when you hear this. So there's a vendor, and they shall not be named, but we were vetting them and looking at them for a solution, and we had a lot of demos and all this kind of stuff. And so I do what I always do. I ask a lot of questions. And from the experience that you have with me, I am not unpleasant. Like, I am not a mean person, but I do ask questions. I ask specific questions and I want answers. And if you don't give me an answer, my face is going to show that you didn't give me an answer. So I was in an elevator at the ICE conference, and the sales guy who I've dealt with on I don't know how many demo calls, I get on the elevator, I'm talking to this person, and I look over and he's literally standing like right beside me, like with his little name badge. I'm like, oh, hey, XYZ person. And he's like, hi. And I'm like, it's really nice to meet you in person. And he's like, yeah. And he looks at my name badge, and I kid you not, this guy just went.
You probably deal with him like I do, because you can't sell me crap. I prove it. Yeah.
The person I was talking to was like, what was that about? And I'm like, that was awesome is what that was about. And I'm not mean. I was like, he just can't handle a question.
Yeah.
Kid.
That's his problem.
Little kids. It was just hilarious. I was like, dang, boy, come on, woman up. You can do this. You can do this. Sorry, I thought y'all get a kick out of that.
That's funny.
That's awesome.
Congratulations to you, Becky. I think you deserve, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
It was hilarious. It was great. Anyway, sorry.
That was fun.
Jen brought all the facts. I brought all the funnies, and that's what I'm here for.
This was just so
So
great.
much.
This was thank you,
It was
Becky.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was fantastic.
Thank you, Molly, for
Good
putting it
times.
together, and
Yes,
thank
thank
you
you,
for sharing,
Molly.
Becky. It was great.
Yes. Y'all are all amazing women. I'm so glad that I could spend the time with you.
Me too. And let's do it again, after annual, right? Because then we'll have like, I don't know, there are a bunch right around there. I think TMC is in the fall, and we'll circle back up and see what's changed.
Going to TMC? Because I keep hearing that they get more out of the Mortgage Collaborative than Lenders One, but I've been with Lenders One for so long and I love it. And so I thought about trying their summit or whatever they call it. I don't even know. In the fall. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye, ladies.
Good times.
Have a
Thanks,
great
ladies.
week.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.